We are the church. Beyond Sunday. Beyond Sunday. Yes, we are Wheeler Beyond Sunday.
Hello, and welcome back to Wheeler Beyond Sunday. My name is Derek, and I'm with Amanda and Aubrey and Mackenzie today. Welcome, guys. I'm glad you can be a part of the conversation.
Hey guys.
Hello. Glad to be here.
So, today we're going to be talking about Ginger's sermon, Clay Jar's Concrete Faith. This is in a series talking about health and stuff. And so, as you may remember, we have been moving through this series, and it's about self-care. In the past few weeks, we've talked about physical health, and we've talked about our physical bodies as an act of love for God and our Creator. This week, we were invited to consider the care of our mental and emotional health as an expression of our love for God. Ginger began her sermon by discussing several extremely prominent Christian leaders in history who struggled with mental health issues. Martin Luther is one of them, the father of Protestantism, struggled deeply with depression, anxiety, and emotional turmoil, doubting his faith and even the goodness of God that led him into such a deep despair that he suffered physically from his mental anguish. Also, she talked about Charles Wesley, who battled with depression throughout most of his life as well, having an early obsession with death and even wishing his own death or that he had never been born on an occasion. Even still, he penned over 6,000 hymns while walking through what seemed like an eternal darkness. She also talked about one of my patriarchal fathers, C.S. Lewis, who endured constant grief and struggle, living through personal loss and the chaos of war, writing under a pen name about his grief after the most painful loss of his wife of only 4 years. And then lastly, she talked about Mother Teresa's journals that were published after her death that revealed she struggled with depression for most of her life while continuing to serve the needy. So, the question for you all, were you aware of these pillars of the that these pillars of the Christian faith struggle with their mental health?
No, I definitely wasn't. I think the Charles Wesley one shocked me more than any of them.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever really thought about it, but since that sermon, I've been like, well, of course they did. Of course they had mental health issues. They were human. So I never considered it, but I've been thinking about it since the sermon.
Between, yeah, they're human. And again, we've been over it a couple times on this podcast. We got it a whole lot easier than they had it. And you like to think that the visionaries and the people who are giving all the advice have been around the block. So, it's not a far reach to think that they had it, but no, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
Yeah. When Ginger shared this part of their story, in terms of your reaction, a lot of you said you had no idea, but how does that make you feel as you're thinking about these, prominent figures having these kind of struggles?
I felt relief personally. I was really like I said, I was shocked by it, but then, um, which she kind of went in depth. I believe it was about Charles Wesley talking about how, um, he and his brother John, who, he founded Methodism, and how they didn't get along. And at some points they struggled, and that he struggled so heavily these, with these mental ailments that he wasn't, I don't want to say he wasn't sure about his faith, because I don't know. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it gave me relief that someone that's a pillar of, my sect of Protestantism, um, had some of these hardships too.
Yeah. we see these people as having an unshakable faith, as having a different level of connection with God than we have. But learning of their mental health struggles shows us just how vulnerable we all are. Even people with rock solid faith can struggle with doubt and despair. I know for me that's very true. So, how does knowing about the deep pain of these larger than life figures change the way you view your own anxieties or mental health concerns?
I think there's a normalization to it, and that just because I've experienced, depression or anxiety and trauma, doesn't mean that I can't also have that level of faith and that level of ability to serve God, even when these staples in Christianity have struggled. I can struggle too and still serve. So I think, like Amanda said, it was like a relief and an acceptance of my, I guess, fear of like not doing this right. So yeah, a relief.
Yeah, for me, it lowers the bar on trying to pretend. I think a lot of us, especially in professional settings and in church, carry a lot of unspoken pressure to appear like we have it together. In leadership roles, you feel that. As a husband, you feel that. Um, and but I feel like this is one of the important things of being a part of a church and active in a church community is you learn you have others you can be in community with and not have to pretend. I think the Bible studies we've started this year at the church have really taught a lot of us about that, and we've gained closer relationships with each other and have been able to take off that mask and quit pretending that everything is always okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, ditto. There's not a whole lot more to say there. And the simple fact you mentioned the 6,000 hymns still, like that was still able to be done, that there was still a light shining enough to get that done is just amazing and let you don't lose all hope.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we read Psalm 88 as our psalter for this service, which, if you haven't read it before, is one of the more despairing psalms in which the author describes himself as hopeless, isolated, and as good as dead, saying things like, "From my youth I have suffered and been close to death, and you have taken from me friend and neighbor. Darkness is my closest friend." It paints a picture of someone who is crying out to God for aid and receiving none. It is the only psalm that offers no hope at its conclusion. She used this passage because it is a good example of the type of darkness that some people live with every single day, including some of the historical Christians we look up to. What were your feelings as we read through this passage?
It was pretty dark.
Yeah, when I was sitting there, I was like, oh wow, like that. I didn't know that's the direction this was going today. But there is like a related, like being able to relate to it, and that we have all gone through things where I think we've felt helpless and hopeless. So being able to recognize ourselves in scripture, I think is a very important part of anyone's faith journey. So I think even though it kind of caught me off guard, because usually we hear these hopeful, uplifting ones, and just to hear one that is so just sad was a little different. But again, I think it just brought okay, I can see myself in this.
Yeah. To me, it was the words uncomfortable. It was somewhat uncomfortable to read that. The church doesn't always know what to do with that level of darkness and honesty. Um, we want resolution, I guess. But some seasons in reality don't really resolve like that. And some people deal with these issues their entire life. And so, did you find you were able to relate or maybe recall a time in your life when you experienced the feelings expressed in the psalm?
Oh, yeah. Me and Mackenzie were talking before this about how open are we supposed to be here? Um,
Share all the things.
yeah, I'm like, y'all might not want to listen to me anymore.
When's the last time we cried on a podcast?
Right. Oh gosh, I've struggled with anxiety, and OCD. Talked about that many times my whole life, and there was a time, gosh, it feels like it was just a few months ago, but it was a few years ago that it was just in an incredibly dark time, and um, I couldn't see my way out of it, and spent my time um, basically like the Psalter was. I very much resonated with that, and I think that's what kind of took me aback about it. Was it took me back to that place of feeling that way, and I don't like to revisit that place. So, I think that it definitely brought that back up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just um, recognizing my own traumas starting at a very young age and where that led me. And I've talked on here before, and I talk about it quite often in our Bible study group as an on again, off again relationship with God. And during those times, that is what I felt. I felt very hopeless and not knowing what my next move was going to be, or even if I wanted to make a next move. And so, like I said a minute ago, just being able to relate to scripture in that way is, I think, powerful, but also just sad. And also recognizing that I think everyone in the church that day, or anyone who reads that, would probably relate to that in some way.
Yeah,
Gosh, yeah. And I think that it's hopeful to see that that was included in the Bible. I think a lot of times, Derek, you were talking about our Bible study groups. We've been attempting to read through the Bible, all of us, and there are times I'm like, why is this in here? Like I have to Google it because I'm like, why did we include this? And so that was one of those moments where I was like, this was included. It was important enough to God to be included. So um, it doesn't have to be viewed as such a terrible, terrible thing, the blunder of my life.
for sure. Ginger paired that psalm with a very hopeful scripture from 2 Corinthians 4 6 through 12. Let's listen to Ginger's commentary on these verses.
Out of the darkness of their mental and emotional anguish, the light of Christ shined brightly through the lives of Luther, Wesley, Lewis, and Mother Teresa. It did not stop them from doing what God had called them to do. Even when they questioned their own worth, even when they questioned God's presence, and at times even when they questioned God's very existence, they still continued to serve. Paul then goes on to write of our fragile nature, likening us to clay pots who have had a gift invested into us, the invested gift of the light and light of Christ. He did so calling upon his own experience when he says we are experiencing all kinds of trouble, but we aren't crushed. We are confused, but we aren't depressed. We are harassed, but we aren't abandoned. We are knocked down, but we aren't knocked out. In spite of our fragile nature, though mentally and emotionally we may feel crushed, we may feel confused, we may be harassed and knocked down because we are misunderstood, Paul encourages us to cling to the hope that we cannot be defeated because of the power of God at work within us and for us.
Okay, so not using names, is there someone you know who struggles with their mental and emotional health, who is maybe neurodivergent, yet the light of Christ continues to shine out of the darkness of their turmoil?
I can think of several people that I have a lot of love and respect for that have remained faithful through things that I think are unimaginable. Losing a child, losing a spouse. Um, and so I think there's just a lot of hope and strength in them. And like I said, I have the utmost respect and love for them. Um, but I have several people on that list.
Yeah.
I completely agree. That's, what comes to mind for me is these people, and especially in my first job where I worked with abused children, um, seeing the light that still, even though we weren't talking about church stuff, the light that still shone through them, their innocence, it was still there, even when the most horrible things had been done to them. Um, that that was, really the only thing that would get you through.
Yeah.
I've not got necessarily people close to me, but more like friends and work friends and stuff like that. It's like an alternate universe. Like, luckily I've not been tested in that way. Um, and I can't even imagine a world where I would or could.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like you said, it's a testament to how great their faith is to overcome, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Have you ever gone through a period of mental anguish where you struggled to see the power of God at work in your life? A time when you felt crushed or abandoned? If so, how did you get past it while retaining your hope and faith? I mean, for me, I can think of a few periods in my life that were very dark, and in the moment, it feels like you don't know how you're going to get out of it. And, but I feel like at least a few of those periods in my life, digging through it, getting through it every day, and turning to God for help, like those are some of my biggest periods of spiritual growth I think I've gone through myself. But they're very dark times, and it's really hard when you don't think you can see it a lot at the end of a tunnel.
This was the question that prompted me to ask Amanda, like, how real are we getting on this? Because I, like Derek, have a lot of different times that I think of that I'm like, oh man, like I was lost and angry, so angry. Um, my dad was deployed to Iraq when I was 10, and then came back with severe PTSD, and then it took a toll on my mom. So that was a very hard part of my life. And then have dealt with sexual assault, domestic violence, difficulty co-parenting, so many different darknesses that I can find that I at the time did not see hope, did not feel God's presence, and truly doubted um, if He was there, or if I've done something wrong. I had a lot of self-doubt. And I wrote a poem for one of our Bible study questions, and I referred to myself as like a leaf being washed away in a creek, just complete chaos, not knowing where I'm going, and then being brought to the calm of a bank. And that's what I like to think of like my journey as like I was brought to the bank, I was brought to the stillness, I was brought home, and what that looks for me now, and what I went through to get there. And I've tried to be open about my like trauma and my mental health, because I want that to be a testimony for someone who may be in that place that I was, that there is an overcoming, and there are people who understand It may not be me, it could be someone else, but that there is some guiding way. You may not see the bank, but it is there and you can find it. So reflecting back on that, I can see, even in those dark times, I see spots of that lot. I see people who I crossed paths with that I truly believe were put there by God, even though in that time that is not what I perceived it as.
It's a great story. It's a great story.
That's so powerful. I love that verse that Ginger shared about the time when you felt crushed or abandoned. I've got the verselets plug for verselets of that. At a time when I felt that way, and tried, it was a good reminder. So when she brought that back up, that was really a wonderful thing. And I don't know, if anyone's listening wanting the secret for how did you get past it while retaining your hope and faith. I don't know.
I read that question to Matt earlier, and I was like, I didn't.
I didn't.
I didn't. And I think
Yeah.
also dismantling the stigma in that, and that people question their faith, and that is a normal part of this.
Yeah. For sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Amanda.
No. I love that. That was the conversation piece that I think should be had with that. And what your shirt says, everyone should go to therapy. I think that's how you get through it. Ginger talked in her sermon about how there's no shame in therapy, there's no shame in needing medical help, medication, things like that. And that's what changed my life. I heard many pastors, and even very well-meaning ones that were very mental health forward, say you should, not even say directly to me, but in a sermon, say we need to pray harder, we need to have more faith. And I'm like, I don't think I can. I've prayed as hard as I can, and I've had as much faith as I feel like I can. So I think that it's just important to hear that. It's important to beat that dead horse of it's okay to need medical help. Sometimes it has nothing to do with your willpower. It has everything to do with a chemical imbalance in your brain, or trauma that happened to you, or trauma that happened to happened to people in your family tree. That I could go on a tangent about that, about generational trauma. It passes down.
Yeah. So Sunday scriptures reminded us that Jesus is no stranger to suffering after what he endured on the cross. He knows what it means to face darkness and to mourn and to struggle. How does it feel to think about Jesus dealing with the same kind of anguish and darkness that we are all talking about here?
I think there's a part of me that wants to minimize like my story in that, because I'm like, I have no idea what the weight of everyone's sins being forgiven would bear. Um, when I read that question in preparation for this podcast, I did think about the scientific process of that level of trauma, that his body being fully human while still being fully God, his body would have experienced all of those things, that fight or flight response, like that pure panic, that would have all still been true for him. And I don't know, I don't even know how to put it in words, but the love that comes in that, knowing that he willingly did that for us, is just, I think sometimes I can't wrap my head around
He
it.
somehow still did it. Yeah.
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 I could stand to have a little bit more confidence in myself, and to think like all the, I've been doubted before, whether it be at work or at school or any old thing you can think of, and just the amount of doubt and naysayers that he had, dealt with every single day.
Hmm.
Um, like the gall some people have to tell him like he's not who he is of all the people. and then to withstand that and, like you said, still prevail.
For sure. And, if Jesus can be on the cross and yell out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in those moments, feel that pain. We should feel the, you know, we should feel like we can scream out and cry that too when we need to. And that's okay. Later on in the sermon, Ginger shared some really interesting statistics about just how common these types of struggles are. Let's listen to those numbers.
Friends, today in the U.S., 1 in 5 adults, 1 in 7 young persons aged 6 to 17 suffer from some type of mental illness. That's just the ones that are diagnosed. 15 to 20% of the U.S. population is diagnosed as neurodivergent, which includes such conditions as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, aphasia, and other lesser-known conditions.
Even though mental illness is a fairly common with pressures at work, at home, or in social settings can cause us to feel like we need to hide our emotional struggles or prioritize productivity over healing. Have you ever felt ashamed or embarrassed to share your mental health struggles?
I think at a younger age, I certainly did. Um, Even now, I still know that they're like, you have to be in the right company sometimes.
Yeah.
But certainly as a teenager, trying to process trauma and all of those things, I was like, I can't tell people this happened to me, and I can't tell people that, you know, I may be having suicidal ideation. I can't tell my friends that I'm on these antidepressants because I assumed wouldn't get it. So definitely in my younger years, I think going through my education. So I'm a therapist. So I have plenty of friends who are also therapists. So I think it's gotten easier for me to talk about my traumas and talk about my mental health struggles because I'm kind of surrounded by it all the time anyway. But definitely in my late teens, early 20s, that was something I really struggled with.
Yeah.
My gosh, yeah. I think for me, Mackenzie, it was almost, I feel like I've always been pretty open, but it was almost kind of opposite when I started working in the mental health field. I didn't want anyone to know because I felt like that made me less, uh, you know, less capable in my job. I'm trying to tell people how to feel better, and I can't make myself feel better. That's a problem. Um, you know, so I think that has made me embarrassed. I went on a trip one time with a colleague, and I was like, "Whoa, I forgot to take my medicine," and I like grabbed it out of my purse, and she asked me what it was. I told her, and she said, "I wouldn't tell people that you take that." Um, I wouldn't tell people that you take that because I mean the job that we were in was fairly serious and involved a lot of court, um, testifying in court and different things like that. And I know she said it out of love, but um, because that could get around and they could bring that up, to you. But um, I think that stuck with me for a while. I was like, oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother avenue of being judged for you trying to take care of it.
Yeah,
Not just being judged because you've got this thing, you're also judged because you're trying to fix it,
yeah,
which is crazy. Um, I've been fortunate, I guess, grand scheme that I've not, I don't want to say privileged because that's by no means what I am, but like I've not had to be put through like I said, some of the things that you all certainly experienced. But I don't feel ashamed, but like it would make me second guess bringing something up, knowing that my little, thunderstorm that's going on in the back of my head cannot, hold a candle to something somebody else is going on. So I would certainly internalize, no matter how much you may think my thing's big, whatever thing I've got going on, but I certainly don't. So I would maybe be embarrassed about sharing that way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
it's also important to recognize how much more difficult that is for men. I think we would be amiss to not discuss the societal pressure of men to not talk about these
I don't
things.
have a problem.
So tough.
If you're just listening, he puffed up a little bit.
Babe, do I have
So,
problems? No comment.
You're still
no.
recording?
Yes.
I've been taking that.
She said, "Are you still recording?" The definitely no comment.
So that goes into the next question we've talked a little bit about, but has someone made you feel less than because you live with mental illness or are neurodivergent? And I don't know if I have any neurodivergency or not. I've never been diagnosed, but at times I feel like my brain does work very differently than others, and I felt insecure about that at times because I sometimes don't get the reaction that I think I'm going to get from what I say, and sometimes, and it's like, man, I don't know, I'm trying here, but you feel insecure about it, and so I don't know. Has anyone ever put you in a place where you felt like you're less than because of what you have?
I think I put
And we've
myself in
already kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think again, definitely I'm gonna refer to like my teenage and early 20s again. Um, before I understood really like what I was going through, I would be in situations I'm like, I'm crazy. There's something wrong with me. Like
You figured it out.
this is not normal. And so and I think that was more like Amanda said, it was more like me doing that. But I think um again, I think there were some like the comment like your coworker made. I think there are little things that were said to me during those times that I look back and I'm like, why would they have said that to me? Like why is that the words you chose to speak to me?
Yeah.
But in that it has made me more aware of how I respond when people share with me. Um, and I mean that more on a personal level than as like a therapist level. Obviously that comes in therapy, but when it's like a one-on-one, especially with someone I'm close to, I'm very mindful of my reaction and how even if seemingly harmless, I could say something harmful. And I think that happens a lot, but I also think that there are some people who just don't get it. And so it can happen unintentionally. Um, but also sometimes I'm like, that was a bold choice to make.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, have you seen a shift in people's willingness to discuss these topics in recent years? And if so, why do you think that is?
I do think the conversation um, has been more normalized. Obviously, we've discussed that there's still stigma there. I think millennial age and down, it's definitely becoming more acceptable to talk about. And I think Gen X and um, boomers they're joining that conversation a little. They may struggle with that a little more because that stigma was so heavily perpetrated onto them. Um, I do think we also have to talk about the harmful side of how some terms are used so inappropriately. And again, I don't think it's meant to be harmful, but it's very common for people to be like, "Oh, I'm so depressed because I'm sad. I'm
Yeah.
anxious because I'm just nervous." I think with the shift in that perspective and the shift of being open to it, I think also requires for there to be education on these things. That you're going to be sad, and that does not mean you're depressed. You're going to be nervous. That doesn't mean you have anxiety. If they are becoming or negatively impacting your life, let's have a conversation, or go to your doctor and have a conversation is what I should say. If you are truly concerned about how you are feeling, seek medical advice. But I think if those are just like, trendy words that you're using, maybe be a little more mindful of what's behind them.
That's great advice.
Think before you talk.
Yeah. Mackenzie and I like to send each other videos about this a lot, um, especially with, you know, uh, if I mention OCD, people are like, "Oh yeah, it's because you're so clean, right?" Because I do like to clean, and I like my house to be clean, but that has absolutely nothing to do with my OCD. Um, and sometimes, it's made light of, and I'm like, "Nope, that's not that version of OCD." My version of OCD is if I don't say this prayer this many times and blink my eyes this many ways, then the person sitting next to me is going to go to hell, or they're going to die, or something terrible is going to happen to them, and it's all on my shoulders to save them. Um, and I think that it sounds crazy, and maybe people will hear that and be like, "Well, she's crazy. I'm never listening to this again." But
There's probably a lot we
but
can blame on you for not
right,
blinking.
right. I know there's a lot you could blame on me.
Next
I'm
time I
telling
stump
you.
my toe, I'm, Amanda,
You'd be like, Amanda blinked the wrong way. But
there
I'm
she
telling
goes
you, if that
again.
had been something that I had heard, someone say, I would have been like, oh my God, it's not just me. It's not just because you kind of, especially when I was younger, they would be like, oh yeah, you're going to wash your hands, or you're going to flip the light switch, which that is some people's version of OCD. I would be like, oh, yeah, and think, oh man, I must, like you said, Mackenzie, I must really be crazy. I must really have something going on. And then a close friend of mine also struggles with the same thing. And she started talking about it one day, and I was like, oh my gosh, wait, you think these things too? And, you don't purposefully think them, they just pop into your head. And so I love that, Mackenzie. I love that you said that we can downplay things that are real everyday struggles for people.
Very well said. So Ginger also pointed out that the church, which should be a place where people feel safe to discuss this kind of struggle, has historically been far more judgmental than we would expect, beginning with the early belief that mental and emotional issues were caused by demons and therefore a sign of spiritual weakness. The attitude has lessened over the years, but there are still many Christians who believe that mental illness is nothing more than a lack of faith, and that taking medication or seeing a therapist is a sign of weakness and would not be necessary if one just prayed and had faith. Did you grow up with the idea that seeking therapy or external mental health support was somehow a bad sign or a sign of weakness as a Christian?
I feel, and without, saying anything bad about parents, ancestors, all those good things, it, it certainly has its own. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Um, the struggle is real. When you have people who have these certain mindsets, there's no change them because it's how they grew up. The church is very much the same thing. It's, you know, oh, there's insert some kind of, um, behavioral health thing, or pick a minority or whatever, and you just it doesn't exist if you kind of turn a blind eye to it. Um, so are a lot of these behavioral health things where it's easier to not deal with it. It's easier to not talk about it because there is no fix that necessarily um, can come from just saying go be okay. It takes medicine. It takes talk and learning how to deal with things. Um, and anything that's new is scary. Back to the other question, and Mackenzie's comments about the younger generation just feels more apt to discuss it. I don't know why that is. most people are pretty private. Maybe that's what it is that privacy is going away because of social media and everything. That's why people tell everybody everything. It's just a different age.
Yeah.
Aubrey, when we
Thankfully,
were, oh, sorry, Derek, go ahead.
go. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, when we were, all trying to get on, Aubrey, you said something, like if you break your arm, you get a cast. But that's not always true when it comes to mental illness, it's a whole combination of things, and this combination may not work, and this combination works for you, but it doesn't work for me. It's a lot messier,
Yeah,
and
and
it
if you
takes
can't fix it,
so.
it shows a lack of knowledge on your part
Mm-hmm.
if you can't fix it. So
Yeah.
why would I admit to not being able to fix something? Then I'm stupid.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
Yeah,
I
this
didn't
takes.
grow up in that kind of environment. I don't think. I remember even I think in kindergarten, I went to a child therapist. Don't remember why. Must have been a bad kid or something. But I remember sitting in there talking to a guy on the couch, and then we'd play games together while he talked to me. But I remember that a little bit as a kid. So I'm thankful I didn't have parents that thought that way.
And let me clarify. I don't feel like my parents
No,
felt that way, but it's definitely like again the generations that got more able to talk about, and um, we'll leave that there
yeah.
before I stick my foot in my mouth.
I think, Aubrey, what I was going to say to it that you may resonate with is yes, but I don't know who told me that. Um, it,
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't recall anyone necessarily expressly saying it to me, but I knew that was the vibe, and I say that with parents that did take me to a therapist when I was a teenager. So I know that my household was open to that, uh, but the overall vibe, I knew in general, especially within the church, was ooh, but don't
Exactly
talk
like
about it.
exactly like what you said about don't tell anybody you're taking those.
Yeah.
None of my parents told me you're not allowed to have a behavioral health issue.
Hmm.
Um, but the vibe was like it's just easier if you just pretend it don't exist, or
Yeah.
like
For sure. So, why do you think people still reject the idea of professional mental health support, even with all the studies that show most mental illnesses have a psychological causation and are just as real and damaging as physical illness?
because they can put politics into it and say that's the left telling you to be weak and admit all your things, or I mean there's a thousand reasons why people argue just to argue because somebody said something. Oh, I feel like this is going to create a firestorm. Let me write this comment in the comments here and really get these people arguing. People get off on creating chaos.
I think for a lot of people too, accessibility can come into play. Um, you know, Paying out of pocket for therapy is pricey. Insurance will deny therapy, will deny medications that may be prescribed. So I think accessibility is a big issue. I think also in the world we live in, even though like we're screamed at to take care of ourselves and do this and that, there's still like we are so busy. Like so when am I going to go to therapy because I have to take my kid to baseball practice and I have to go work my full-time job and I have to make sure that I do XYZ too and keep a clean home and do this and that. And so I think it can often get put on the back burner and we go onto autopilot, not realizing or maybe fully realizing the impact it's having on us. And the thing about mental health is when it goes on for so long with no um, way to try to reconcile it, it can start to present in physical ailments too, and that is usually what gets people in the door. Is that physically something ended up being wrong, and so then they went to the doctor. Um, yeah,
That's what's crazy is being in the healthcare field and whatnot. You know how big the discrepancy is between the supply and demand like you said, for access. But there's literally never been a time better than now because there's all these apps, there's all these ways to do it. And that just, is a glimpse into what it was, which must have been just awful, not being able to, again, you got probably beat with something or had a piece of your brain taken out for acting funny. Back in the old days.
Not that long ago.
No, they dig a hole and stick you in it, and when you come out, you'll be fine.
Yep.
Wow. So Ginger shared a Facebook post that Mackenzie, you posted, which we'd like to share with you.
The other day, Mackenzie shared a post by Erin Holmes reflecting on her mental health journey. And Erin closed the post by saying, "Needing a therapist doesn't make you a bad Christian. Needing a therapist doesn't make you a bad Christian. It doesn't mean you don't pray enough, trust me. It doesn't mean that you don't have enough faith. It doesn't mean that you don't have community or don't get vulnerable with your community. It just means you need help." And she goes on to say, it's okay to need help. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have Jesus plus a therapist.
She also shared a list of biblical figures who struggle with what they would likely have been diagnosed with today as depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. People like Moses, David, Hannah, Naomi, Jeremiah, Paul, and countless others all struggle with the same mental health challenges that many of us face today, yet they are remembered for their faith and love for God. What do you think it would look like if more Christians treated mental and emotional health care as an extension of their faith journey, as an expression of our love for God, realizing that it can add to their faith rather than weaken it?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question. Well, I think one, it would do exactly what it says. It would add to their faith. And two, I think that it would make uh I don't want to say us. We're not supposed to say us and them. It would make those of us that identify as Christians to those that are not identifying as Christians or have church trauma or whatever that may be. I feel like it would make us more accessible, people more open to us because we've done a pretty terrible job um, being open about this. So I think that it would bring people in.
I think I'm a very picture person. So I think of and I can't remember the name of it. Amanda, you may know, but they break glass and then put it back together.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? I can't think of what
Yes.
it's called, but
Like a
I think
mosaic something.
maybe, but
Yes.
there's a word for it.
There's a
They're not
name.
like making another picture, they're just putting the glass back together how it was.
For this, it could be either way. But
But there's
Okay.
like the
I
little
think
gold
Reading
line.
too far into the actual thing.
I think in the brokenness, because we said darkness or light can shine through the
I know
darkness.
what you're saying now.
I think in our brokenness is where we show our lot, and so I think in the grand scheme of things, our testimony is what can reach people, and that's what we see um, with the people God chose to use despite of their perceived unworthiness or weakness. The broken people are who God used, and I think that just speaks for what we can do. We will probably never be written about in any book, much less one like the Bible, but that God can use our brokenness for great things to share his love, to welcome people into his love. And I just think that I know I started getting teary during that list, especially the Naomi wanting, I can't remember the name, that she
Mara.
wanted, yes, that means bitter.
Mhm.
And I just think of of that testimony and what came of that. So again, being able to be used through our brokenness.
Very well said. My allergies got the best of me during that list too.
I'm not crying.
Yeah.
You're crying.
And that type of art is called, I could be butchering the pronunciation, kintsugi.
Oh yeah, we
Uh,
talked about it. Yeah, okay.
yes.
The plate, is it what she was talking about with the plates?
Yes, it says it's literally translated as golden joinery, a centuries old
Yeah.
Japanese method of repairing broken pottery and plates by mending the cracks using tree sap lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. I love that. And it ends up more beautiful than it was to begin with. So cool.
So the last question here, as Christians, what can we do to help make those around us feel comfortable to share their mental health burdens and open up about their struggles? And how can we as a church help change the cultural taboo around discussing mental health?
Derek, what does the church need to do better? No, no, no loaded.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think we need to love each other and find community with each other and empathize with what people are going through. And if you see someone struggling with stuff, just get to know them and be there for them however best we can be. Um, and not let people struggle alone unless that's what they want. Sometimes there are people who do want to go through things alone at different times, and that's okay if that's what they want. But we shouldn't. We should be there if we want them. If they want help, we should be open to that.
I think having conversations like this is something pretty profound, actually, because it is taboo to talk about. But I think having a preacher that's willing to do a sermon on mental health, that's a tough task, um, and having people who are willing to put it out there. Um, and I think you mentioned our Bible groups earlier, and I think that's been such a good place for both the men's and women's group as a safe place. So I think making sure that we maintain those safe spaces, being willing to accept people how they come in, and hearing them out. What is your story? What brokenness are you overcoming and shining through anyway? And I think also knowing when our recommendation needs to be more, urging people to take care of themselves. And that can be very difficult because there are going to be some people you're like, maybe you should go talk to the doctor. That would be very offensive. However, if you build rapport with people, that conversation can be easier in itself. So I think continuing to create these safe spaces and maintaining them for what they are can lead people in the right direction. And my hope is that every church can have that, and then we can start to bring in people who are not in church and who may be completely against it, because I certainly was at one point. And finding people who they may have not been through what I went through, but they heard me out, and that itself was life changing.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Just having conversations.
Yeah, share first.
Yeah.
That'll make them feel like the guard's down. You've already been vulnerable. I can too. You didn't lose anything when you told me that, so let me share my piece. Absolutely.
Oh, great
I,
stuff.
I think there's something beautiful, and it's my favorite part about being a therapist is holding other people's stories with them. Um, I often use the and I don't know if it's an analogy, but when I have a client who's like really tough to get to, I always say, like, you're carrying all these rocks. You don't have to carry all these. Like, you can hand some over to me. And so
I
I
would have
think
turned around right then and walked out your door.
that's
I will
me.
not give you my rocks.
Those are
No
my
rocks for
rocks.
you. Um, but I think just being willing to be the holder of some pain for other people, bearing witness to their stories and testimonies. There's just so much power when things are spoken and not left to be unknown and unshared.
Yes. There was this company, I don't know if it's still in business or whatever, but I bought this shirt from, or the sweatshirt from in college, and I still wear it. And I feel like it should be the church's slogan. That it says your brokenness is welcome here. Um, and so um, I think that's what we're all saying. You know, it's welcome here. I'll share mine. You can share yours, and it's okay. We get it.
Yeah, for sure. Any other closing comments?
Uh, take your mental health meds. If you need to go to the doctor, please go to the doctor.
Yes.
And there is love out there.
Hmm. And I
Better
think we're
help
gonna. Oh,
available in the App
sorry.
Store. No, you're fine. That's the only one I can think of. There's better help. There's all sorts of things out there that are easy. They're cheaper than what people think they cost to
Mm-hmm.
talk to somebody.
Yeah.
It's on your phone. It's a lot of them. The first time's free, and you can change people as you like. If you're not vibing with somebody, find somebody that you feel like you can share with. Again, these people do it for, like Mackenzie, do it for a living. They know how to get past walls and barriers and sneak a rock here and there.
And of course, I know we're going to share it with our notes and, on our Facebook page, that if you don't know where to start, or if you're really feeling that helpless feeling and you don't feel like you want to be here anymore, or even if it's you're not to that point, but you don't know where to start, dial or text 988 and call it or text it.
Very good. Well, thank you all for having a conversation with me today. I think it was an important one.
Very much so.
All right. So let's have a closing prayer. Lord, thank you for reminding us today that you have always chosen the broken, ordinary people to carry your light, and that you are faithful to shine through every crack. For anyone listening who is struggling, may they know they are not alone, not forgotten, and never beyond your reach. Give us the courage to go first, to love without judgment, and to be the kind of community where it is truly safe to not be okay. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Next week, we will have a break in this series as we celebrate Pentecost Sunday on May 24th. But we will be back with this series after our fourth sermon in the series on May 31st. That week, we'll talk about our intellectual health and the importance of continuing to seek and learn as an expression of our love for God. I'm sure that will be a great one, and we'll be excited to talk to you then. Have a great week, and God bless.
Beyond Sunday. Beyond Sunday. Beyond Sunday.